There's apparently been a recent rise in what are being called lonely single men. And when you look at the numbers, the trend is pretty clear. If you take a look at this chart from Pew, the percentage of men that are without a spouse or a partner has been increasing from back in 1990 at 29% of those between 25 and 54. It's now, I'm not great at numbers, but I'm gonna say 50% higher at 38. Now, you do have a rise in cohabitation that is becoming more common, but even when you consider that, there are more men of sort of prime dating years that are not dating or married. And the data shows that fairly clearly. It's been rising for about 30 years. And in fact, now men are more likely than women to be unpartnered. That was not the case several decades ago. You can actually take a look at that trend over time in this next chart. Women are at a higher rate, going from 29 to 36% over about 3 decades. But the men are higher, and there has now been this divergence right there. And look, depending on who you talk to, they interpret this in a different way, and the stakes of the debate are interpreted differently. Some would point out, as Pew has in this chart, that unpartnered men fare worse economically than partnered men. I would question the direction of the causal arrow there. It is possible that it's not a causal thing, or maybe there's a percentage or a share of both directions. I don't know. But anyway, this is a real thing. And my fear, Adrian, is that the dominant response to this will come from the incels, who very often move rapidly from an acknowledgement of the problem to demonizing other men and all women. In fact, potentially moving to lethal threats of violence or carrying it out. Or people like Jordan Peterson and Tucker Carlson, massive grifters that play to men's fear about their masculinity. They're grifters, they're lying, they're awful. But the problem is actually there. What do you think about it?
I think you're absolutely right about the consequences of this reality. People just need to fully come to terms with the fact that historically women needed men because that's how the oppression structure was set up. We were hostages. We couldn't have credit cards, couldn't own property, couldn't vote, had no voice. Well, of course we'd partner up with a man because we needed one so that we didn't starve to death because men used force to keep us under their thumb. Now, fortunately, things have evolved, and guess what? We don't need men. So if it comes to being in a relationship, it's a matter of bringing something to the table. And if what you're bringing to the table is a toddler-like mentality where you are running around, running amok, expecting a mommy and expecting some kind of subordinate, concubine kind of setup, no woman wants that. So of course you see so many men who are single because they've never realized that they need to actually be tolerable individuals. And as a result, they are single because nobody wants your ass. So of course, just like a job, if you want to actually do well and actually have the opportunity to have that, you need to develop the skills to be in a relationship. And that's what a lot of men need to do.
I agree. Look, I think that what you just talked about represents probably the lion's share of this. I bet there's probably a little bit over the last 3 decades of some of the begrudging increased acceptance of the LGBTQ community that might be influencing these numbers a little bit. There's some economic changes and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I think that you're largely right. I think, and by the way, it's one of the reasons why people like Tucker Carlson feel that they can play to guys misplaced, like pining for old school masculinity. They won't necessarily all state it, although some do, but they miss being owners of women. Basically, they wish that they still had that. So anyway, I was reading about this on Psychology Today, and there was this guy, Greg Matos, who had, based on his research, doing like group therapy and stuff like that, what he thinks could possibly help this. He says upwards of 62% of users on dating apps are men now. There's a disparity there, so there's more competition on the male side. He says recurring dating themes from women of that age range that he's talked to is they prefer men who are emotionally available, good communicators, and share similar values. Which seems reasonable to me. The issue is that the guys doing the advice giving for men, I feel like that's not often what their advice is about you learning to be emotionally available, supportive, independent enough that you can actually live your life without expecting everyone to fill in all the cracks for you, but also able to be a partner. I feel like those are the sorts of things that could actually help to fix this. But that's not where the market is going in terms of the advice.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. There are so many people out there who are telling men that they need to be masculine and that they need to be these stoic creatures who dominate women. Nobody wants that. Once again, nobody wants that. And also there is nuance in the thought that I want a dominant man, but I don't want a man to dominate me. And it's like, if you spend time trying to understand that nuance and try to adapt and also have the skills to be, a solid partner, then great, people will want you to come to the table. But by treating women as though they are possessions or that they deserve to be dominated or supposed to do this, it's like you're gonna continue to run into these issues. And again, nobody will want you.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I know, look, maybe we'll get some like incels or whatever they'll watch this and be like, no, he's lying, he doesn't understand. Well, first of all, look, dude, I'm married, so I'm not worried about myself at this point. Like, I'm just trying to help you. But anyway, like I don't know why they can't just follow the money. People are making a killing diluting these guys and stringing them along when it's really not that complicated. Like there's an increase in the single lonely man here. Lots of people are still in relationships, and it ain't difficult to figure out how that process works necessarily. Now there's a lot of influences here. Not everyone who is not in this obviously isn't an incel. Not everyone responds with misogyny and hatred and fear and violence and all that. But they do seem to be like driving the conversation on places like Reddit and stuff like that. And that's my fear.